A change of heart. In that moment, Lee's phone was old, with low specs, often dropped by her two young children as they fought over watching YouTube. The constant barrage of chat notifications from dozens of Zallo and Facebook groups made her phone freeze, sometimes unable to open anything at all. As if that wasn't enough, Yen had recently created a new group chat called Sisterhood of the Starfruit Tree, adding La and Hawaii to it, to gossip about husbands, and maybe a little stock trading. You know? Yen said. Sometimes at midnight or the crack of dawn, the phone would buzz again. Hawaii's message would pop up, talking about another argument with her husband, same old issues. Nothing ever changed. Yen would respond. Why do I feel more and more like quitting my job? I want to live a different life. One with different kinds of busyness. I'm tired of waking up early, rushing through breakfast, yelling at my kids and husband. I'm tired of being on my feet all day, pushing and prodding everyone along, then hitting the road like a moth drawn to the flames. Work piles up endlessly at the office, day after day, without a breath to take. La was sinking into the daily grind, burdened with loneliness and constant worries that sometimes made her feel like she was about to collapse. Some evenings, as the sun set, La would sit with her knees tucked in on the porch, watching the day fade away. She wondered if she would disappear into the darkness, dissolve as if she never existed. We have to live differently, Yen said one day. We need to stir up the life that's trying to drown us. But how can we stir it up? La asked. When I wake up, my mother-in-law is lying on the couch in the living room. All the positive energy I had for the day just vanishes, leaving me with nothing but irritation. Don't pay attention to what she says, Yen advised. And stop serving others all day long. If the house goes uncleaned for a day, so what? If your mother-in-law skips a breakfast of homemade pho, so what? There's food everywhere, she won't starve. Why must you wake up early, cook, and serve her, only to sit there later feeling sorry for yourself? La wanted to reply, but she held back. Each of the three women lived in different cities, each with unique family circumstances. La had quit her job long ago to stay home and care for her kids. Her college degree was gathering dust, and her grand dreams were now just distant memories. Even the pretty dresses in her closet seemed pointless. Her makeup had all expired, untouched for months. Lee's husband was in the military, stationed far from home, visiting rarely. Every day, she busied herself with her children, tending the garden and feeding the fish. Her kids had started school, meaning several trips to drop them off and pick them up, along with grocery shopping and cooking, all filling her days. Add to that her husband's broken promises, and weekends became a lonely weight. La realized that her joy was tied up in other people. Yen was the most well-off, having worked at a major telecommunications company for almost 20 years. She also had side gigs to boost her income. Yen was the type of woman who could do anything. Yet, the thought of quitting her job had haunted her for over a year. In these uncertain times, securing a stable job in a big corporation wasn't easy. Only Yen knew how much had changed. The pay no longer matched the effort. The company's performance had dipped, and many departments faced downsizing. Employees worked with one eye on their jobs and the other on the fear of being transferred, or worse. added to the early retirement list. Yen was tired of the constant anxiety. She wanted to escape and take control of her life. Meanwhile, Hawaii worked part-time for an interior design company. During the 2 years of the pandemic, most of her work was online, with only occasional visits to the office. Her husband, a construction worker, was always away, traveling across the country for jobs, leaving Hawaii alone with their 2 children and her elderly mother-in-law, who constantly complained. With everyone crammed into the small house during the lockdown, they often got on each other's nerves. The sound of her mother-in-law's cough was enough to annoy Hawaii. She'd call her just to vent about waking up early to cook pho for her mother-in-law, only to hear complaints like the broth is bland or too much meat. After finishing the meal, her mother-in-law wouldn't even bother to clean up, leaving Hawaii to do everything. And despite being in good health, her mother-in-law insisted on going to the hospital every month for checkups, costing a small fortune. It was no surprise that Hawaii's husband rarely responded to her messages anymore. "It's women's business," he'd say. A phrase that drove Hawaii mad. Yen would remind her, "It is women's business. Though I see so much of myself in you." Years ago, when I first had my daughter, I stayed home with her for almost 2 years. And I had to deal with all sorts of things with my in-laws. But once I went back to work, I was too busy to care about anything else. Life got lighter. "But you weren't in my situation," Hawaii would counter. "I didn't marry my husband, I married his mother. She's here every day. But my husband is always gone." "Your husband is an only child," Yen said. "Living with your mother-in-law is unavoidable. Maybe you need to find something else to focus on. Even if it's something trivial. A new hobby. Perhaps. So you won't have the time to care about your mother-in-law?" But then, Hawaii found joy in her own home. She started sharing pictures of her rooftop garden, lush vines of spinach, water morning glory, herbs, and eggplants. She even shared her first harvest of ripe guava and sweet starfruit, giving some to her neighbors as gifts. Hawaii's calls to the group changed. Instead of complaining, she'd boast about a delicious crab soup made from her homegrown veggies, or a fragrant night-blooming flower she'd discovered on her balcony. Hawaii no longer vented about her mother-in-law. She wasn't the same Hawaii who once called Yen in tears, lamenting how small and insignificant her life felt. The rooftop garden had become her sanctuary, her joy,